Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you with the next update to the French presidential election forecast. So, just as some matter of business, I have made some notable changes to the model since last week. I have found a couple bugs. It turns out, long story short, I've adapted the model from the one I'm using for the Canadian elections, which has worked quite well. But there was a bug in that did not affect the Canadian election at all, but it does affect, or it did previously affect the French election in that candidates who had 0 votes in a previous election, such as Yannick Jadot or Eric Zemmour, it completely mucks the entire model up, or it previously did. I have fixed that, and it's caused a lot of weighting to be significantly changed. Uh, Combined with the addition of profession data brought to you, or thanks to Apcumenwiniz. This guy. Thank you for the help. I don't know how to pronounce your username, but, well, the world knows now. That profession data was added as well, and there was a few changes to how uh, department projection was done. It doesn't that the department projection changes did not affect vote total shares. So if I did those changes in the last update, it would not have changed anything in that update. But it does make it so that there's long story short, there was too much of a bias based on the region previously, and I've removed that. So you get more variance within regions, which is also more realistic because there was quite a lot of variance within regions last election in France and every previous election in France that I've looked at. So we've ironed out a bunch of things. I'm more confident than ever. I think my result from 2 weeks ago was perfectly adequate, albeit some bugs. Like the headline result was adequate. Macron winning in both rounds. I think that is a perfectly adequate result. It is just better now. So the department map is likely going to be more accurate now and going forward. I'm still going to be tinkering away with this, and I will mention when I make any notable changes. But that is where we are for now. So, well, let's start here with what has changed since the last election, or the last update here. So, the biggest changes here is Jean-Luc Mélenchon has lost some support, about 0.5%. That is not strictly a result of softening polling numbers for him. If anything, he's flat polling wise. That is to do with the changes and the bug fixes related to Zemmour and Yannick Jadot, who is not on this sub list because she's not. Frankly, Mélenchon at 9-ish% is kind of soft, but it felt wrong to have none of the left wing candidates here, and the other two are significantly below him. Yannick Jadot and Zemmour getting their numbers fixed did cause a lot of changes here. Zemmour, obviously, he went up about 3%. Macron went down about 3.5%. Le Pen went down about 3.8%. And Pécresse, I think it's pronounced that, she went up about 3.7%. That, the Le Pen and Pécresse change is not even entirely the result of how my model has been treating the third Zemmour and Jadot. Not 100% sure how to pronounce her last name. That is because polling numbers have wildly changed for both of them. And Le Pen's support softening it was kind of caught me by surprise, but Pécresse going up significantly since winning the nomination is completely expected by me. I even said so in the last video that I was expecting her to gain quite a significant increase in her vote share. Because the reality was the French media and the pollsters were pretty much assuming Bertrand was going to win the race, so people weren't really paying, like, non-Les Républicains were not paying attention to Pécresse, really. Like, maybe you had the occasional person like me who, as not a French person, I'm not going to be voting in this election, might have been paying more attention to her, but the people, population at large wasn't paying too much attention, but since she won, she gained a lot of limelight, a lot of spotlight, and she is able to get her message out and her platform out, and it turns out she's actually a lot more popular than the 10-ish% she was getting polled at. Right now, the latest round of polls were pegging her at around, I think it's averages at about 18% in the polls since she secured nomination. Though, because of how my model works, and this is how it's always going to work because it weights previous results as still credible, she's going to be building up support over time. Even if she keeps staying at 18, she'll slowly asymptotically approach that number. And like conversely, Le Pen is now polling around 16.5 range, and so she's going to asymptotically approach 16.5. Macron's probably going to stay around roughly where he is. Zemmour roughly around where he is, and Mélenchon roughly around where he is. There seems to be no really strong movement in any of those three candidates. Now, that all said, I am strongly expecting within the next 4 months that one of the left-wing candidates, be it Hidalgo, Mélenchon, or Jadot, is going to get a rallying effect as the other left-wing supporters rally around one candidate, because right now left-wing candidates in France typically are polling across like the 8 of them 28% total, which is actually very low, significantly worse performance than any of the previous elections in France. But realistically, if they want, due to the way the French election system works, if the left-wing base in France wants to even have a pipe dream at winning the presidency, they have to rally behind one candidate. I expect that will happen because people are not stupid. Will it be enough to get a candidate in second place? I don't know. It will be extremely difficult for Mélenchon, well, let's say in this hypothetical, since he's polling the best of all of them, to get second place. It really would require Pécresse, Le Pen, and Zemmour to basically evenly split the right, and Mélenchon would have to basically rally the entire left, which would be very difficult and very unlikely, considering if you look at the dynamics, Le Pen and Zemmour share a significant portion of their base, but Le Pen and Pécresse don't share a significant portion. And similarly, Zemmour and Pécresse share some of their base based on polling numbers. So it's not impossible, but it'd be extremely unlikely. I would think a more likely outcome is either Le Pen will rally the Zemmour, the part of her base that's defecting to Zemmour right now, or Le Pen's ship will just keep going down because her polling numbers have been softening since Zemmour announced his candidacy, or his candidacy was being speculated on. Since he started being speculated, but Le Pen's numbers have been going down. I expect that will probably continue unless Zemmour does something completely ridiculous on the campaign trail that completely loses support. And I would not be surprised if exiting April 2022 that Reconquête is a larger, more credible force than Rassemblement National. And I apologize for my pronunciations to French people. I'm trying. So there is a lot of nuts and bolts there that could be going on. At the moment, I would expect okay. So the elephant in the room right now. Le Pen's going a second round with Macron. At the trajectory, I'm expecting it's going to be Pécresse and Macron, and we'll go into second round in a bit because I did get second round working, but we're just going to discuss the first round. So now just to discuss some of the parts of this map here. So you might notice that there's these striped departments like this, like these ones here. I'm using this to mark departments that are between, that have the leading candidate is leading by less than 2%. So in this one, and the dominant color is the one who's leading. So in these departments here, I'm not going to list all their names because it's a lot. Macron has the plurality, but Le Pen has a very strong, within 2% support. Here, I believe this is Sarth. This is the only one where Pécresse is on the board, and she's second place in that riding to Macron. There's actually a couple ridings, or not ridings, sorry, departments. There's a couple departments where Pécresse is scoring second place, and there's also a couple ridings where Mélenchon scored second place. Currently, there are no departments where Zemmour is scoring second place. And interestingly enough, actually, his best department presently is Mayotte, which is rather amusing. It does actually make a lot of sense when you boil it down. Mayotte seems to lean more right wing than the other overseas departments. It has a significant, extremely high immigration rate relative to the rest of France, and Zemmour's main thing is wanting to stop immigration. So it does make sense that he would get at least some people on the island, and for the record, he's about 18%. Though it is still amusing because he's also extremely anti-Islam, and Islam is the largest religion on the island, which is not something you would expect. But they might not be. They might be Islamic in name only. Like a lot of people in the West are Christian, but they don't actually observe religious practices. I don't know the details on Mayotte's demographics. That is just an interesting result there. The couple big trends, though, you can notice in these first round department numbers is obviously Ile-de-France area, strong for Macron. Brittany and the Val de Loire, also pretty strong for Macron. And also strong, Val de Loire is strong for Pécresse. She's second place in every single department here. But second place doesn't show. Nord, Hot Nord, and Grand Est are obviously the strongholds of Le Pen. There's some of the ones along the border here with Germany and Belgium, or Luxembourg. I think it's Luxembourg and Germany. Basse-Rhin here, or Haute-Rhin. I think it's Haute-Rhin, and I can't think of the name of this department. These two do seem to have some support from Macron. He's leading in them. But if Le Pen rallies, these will go back to solid Le Pen areas overnight. Similarly, Bourgogne et Franche-Comté, here, if Le Pen numbers rally and Macron stays roughly where he is, these will also swing back to to Le Pen. Though right now, Macron has a narrow lead there. So that's kind of the gist of the details for the first round here. Like southern France, northern France are very strong for Le Pen. Western France is very strong, and Ile-de-France is very strong for Macron, which is what you'd expect from 2017. The dynamics will change. If it is Le Pen versus Macron, I think a lot of these really narrow ridings here or departments, that are between 20 and 25% for Macron, I think they will either shift more towards Macron or more towards Le Pen. I don't think they're going to stay with most of France just tacitly supporting Macron. And 2025 is very tacit. That's a very, very weak support. So now if we go to this map, this is second round. So this is what we will expect if Le Pen wins second place, which is a weird sentence to think about. But if she scores second place, this is what the second round map's going to look like. And this is a massive improvement over 2017 for Le Pen, but it's still a losing result, which if I were Le Pen, I would still be very upset about. And definitely the campaign for her here, more than anything else, is actually to try to rally some more and at least dissuade Pécresse supporters from voting Macron. I don't know if Le Pen will have a good chance of actually rallying Pécresse supporters, but we can see. We will be able to see going forward. But Zemmour is the big one where it matters here, because roughly speaking, 25 to 30% of 2017 Le Pen voters are voting for Zemmour. And roughly speaking, only about 20% of Zemmour voters plan on voting for Le Pen in the second round. Most of them plan on abstaining. So, considering all things considered, 2017 Le Pen and contemporary Zemmour are quite similar policy-wise. Le Pen has moderated on a lot of things, which I believe is why she's actually losing a lot of support, particularly to Zemmour, because a lot of things she's moderated on are where Zemmour is striking really hard. So her campaign, if she's smart, is to basically try to get Pécresse voters to stay home or vote for her, so it's more likely they're going to stay home, and try to rally more of Zemmour's base back to her. Will that happen? It's hard to say right now, but we have time to find out going forward. Just some overviews here. So obviously, northern France, strong for Le Pen. Southern France, very, very South France, very strong for Le Pen. Brittany, and generally speaking, central and West France, like Val de Loire and I can't think of the name of these departments here. Very strong for Macron. And I will note here, so the darkest color I have is 59. Is this dark-ish burgundy, like mustard yellow here. These inner ridings of Ile-de-France are all above 60%. Paris itself is 69%, which is kind of funny. But I don't have darker colors, and I did not really want to create like 6 more or 5 more bars of color just for 4 departments that you probably wouldn't be able to really tell because it'd be so dark. I'd have to basically redo all the color mapping, and it would be possible, but kind of pointless. Paris does not like Le Pen at all. And if we look down here, 47% for Le Pen, about 53% for Macron, which is a disastrous performance for Macron, considering Macron won like 67% of the vote in 2017. So this is math here, like a 23-ish% swing towards Le Pen, which really does go to show how much more right, how far right, that's a bad way to phrase it, how much further to the right the French electorate has moved since 2017. And I expect going forward, it's going to shift further right before it even starts shifting left. I think there's a very strong case to be had that if Le Pen or Zemmour wins, and possibly even if Pécresse wins, especially with the new governing coalition in Germany wanting to expand EU powers, that Frexit is on the cards within the next 5 years if anyone but Macron wins. Now, I would not say Pécresse is anti-EU, but she's not pro-EU like Macron is. She seems more French. Wants to do their own thing, but also kind of work with other people. Le Pen, obviously, historically wanted Frexit, and Zemmour is extremely anti-EU, and I don't think he would bat an eye at Frexit. So there's a very strong likelihood that the result of this election, combined with whether the current German government does actually try to push for more European integration, could see France leave the EU. And if France leaves the EU, I think the EU is probably going to collapse, for the most part. Now, we have one more final thing here before I wrap this up. So, if we go back here, we have Pécresse at 15-ish%, but she's forecast presently in modern polling as of Monday, she's ahead of Le Pen a little bit. My model's going to catch up to that, so since I'm probably not going to do another video on this until next year, unless I get a bunch of polls in before the end of the year, I decided I would do a hypothetical, what would happen if Pécresse went to second round with Macron. And this is what we get. Pécresse does a bit better than Le Pen, getting about 49% to Macron's 51%. Extremely tight race. At that kind of margin, really anything can happen, and turnout's a huge game there. And this is where I think Pécresse would open herself up to having to support a Frexit if the EU tries to centralize more. That's the important criteria. If the EU tries to centralize more. Because if Pécresse wants to win, it seems extremely unlikely that she can erode much more of Macron's base. Not impossible. Maybe Macron could make a mistake. Who knows? That's all what ifs and counterfactuals. We can't forecast that. But the thing she can do for second round is look at the Zemmour base, look at the Le Pen base, and try to attract them to her. I believe, this is off memory, I don't have the numbers queued up here, but close to something like 60% of Le Pen supporters and a bit less, but similar numbers of Zemmour supporters don't intend on voting in the second round if it's just Pécresse versus Macron. That's a lot of people that she could win. I don't think Macron has a pipe dream of winning those people. So it is really there is a question of, does Pécresse want to flirt with some of the more nationalistic sides of France? This is not to say Pécresse herself is not more on the nationalist side than internationalist? Globalist? I don't know. Macron obviously is much more globalist or internationalist, depending on how you want to look at it. He's very pro-EU. Pécresse seems to try to be splitting the difference between the pro-EU crowd and the super hard French nationalist crowd. If she tries to drift more towards pro-EU, I think she's 100% going to lose, at least presently, barring any unforeseen errors on Macron's part. But I do think she does have a shot if she pivots more towards French nationalism, and doing so does flirt with a potential Frexit referendum. If it does happen, I don't think it's going to be like unilateral French government just does it. I think it's going to be like a Brexit referendum, the Brexit referendum, where David Cameron in the 2015 election said he was going to hold a referendum to ward off UKIP. Now, this isn't going to be trying to ward off UKIP, but this would be trying to rally the Zemmour and Le Pen voters. And based on the stance in France right now and the public mood in France, I think there's a very high possibility that if this is put to a referendum vote, they would vote to leave. Obviously, we can't know this yet, but I think there's a high possibility. Now let's dissect this a bit. So against Pécresse, things break down a lot more here. It's a very narrow margin. There's a lot of departments there that are within 2%. There's a lot that are within 3% of each other, very close. Nationally, places like Ile-de-France don't no longer have blowout numbers. Paris is, I believe, only 58%, which is still big numbers, but not anywhere close to 69%. Brittany's a little softer for Macron. Southern France is a bit softer as well. Western, like Val de Loire, is no longer a stronghold, with Sarthe being firmly in Pécresse's camp, Maine-et-Loire barely in Macron's camp, and then Vendée and Mayenne being about a coin flip. Southern France is a bit more in play, or is leaning a bit more towards Pécresse than it was to Le Pen in a second round vote off. And really, Southern France is like the interesting thing about this comparison is if you go back to Le Pen versus Macron, there's very clear north, bottom, Brittany, Ile-de-France, like center France, strongholds. We go here, yeah, Brittany, a little bit to the center of France, yeah, Ile-de-France, yeah, South France. But the rest of it's a lot blurrier. There's not a clear second stronghold. Like, there's not a clear other areas where Pécresse just dominates. She does pretty well in northern France, leading in most departments or being very close in the rest, if you ignore Ile-de-France. But not to the degree that you see with Macron here, Le Pen here, where Le Pen does a bit worse in Burgundy and Bourgogne-Franche-Comté and whatever this center Val, I think is what that's. I don't know. Can't think of the name of this region. And Normandy does a bit worse in those ones, but absolutely blows out Grand East and Hauts-de-Nord. Hauts-de-France? I think it's Hauts-de-France. Hautes? I don't know. I'm bad at French pronunciation. Blame the school system. But again, there's not any of these clear strong points for Pécresse. So it's a very interesting, different race here between these two candidates, which you wouldn't expect, but it does go to show that, yes, France is, if we go back to the first map, yeah, roughly speaking, just trying to do quick mental math here, like 60-ish% of the French electorate is center right or further. 28% is left, and then I think the rest is center left or left. Or sorry, center left or center, which is mostly Macron's base. Macron kind of spans center left to center right, though he himself is governing more center right than anything else, at least in the last couple of years. So France definitely has more right-wing base than it has left-wing base right now, but the right-wing base is not the same, and you really see it between Pécresse and Le Pen. So first, Le Pen, maybe it's easier to see on this map. Le Pen is strongest, obviously, in the north, south. Pécresse is strongest in this region and the south. Those were her the raw number of her supporters are. She's more likely to win second choice votes from Le Pen in Zamora crowd up here and stuff. That's why if you go to the second round map, she's doing well there. But you break it down more. Pécresse is overwhelmingly supported by retirees, by people who have higher social status jobs, such as business owners, uh, higher ranking members in business, middle management, much more support from those people. Le Pen has much more support among the working class, blue collar jobs, from younger people. She blows out 25 to 34 category, considering there's 12 candidates, and she's getting typically 30 to plus 30 to 35% per poll. That's a complete blowout with that many candidates. It's very different sectors of the population, which is why I would say that yes, I think Pécresse or even Le Pen does have the chance of winning this election. I don't think it's likely, at least right now. It really would require Macron to make a big mistake, because I think it's going to be very difficult for a candidate like Pécresse, who does really well with retirees, upper management, uh, older people, 60, late 50s, 60s, to get blue collar young people to think that she's going to credibly help them, because she's really supporting the opposite demographic, or her core base is the opposite demographic. And it's also going to be very difficult for Le Pen to rally the retirees and the upper management when historically she's been pro-Frexit, pro very anti-trade or free trade, very pro-France, very strong French nationalist. And if you look at Brexit, which is the only example we have, the people who supported Brexit are the blue-collar working class people, largely are rural, stuff like that, places where Le Pen already dominates, but the retirees, upper management, actually I think the retirees are pro-Brexit off the top of my head, but the upper management and the upper social status jobs were not generally pro-Brexit. And that's really where Pécresse's base is. Maybe they can rally this, maybe it's just French exceptionalism, France is weird. They will be able to make that coalition work, but historically, that is a hard coalition to make work. It's hard to get those two age demographics to have the same support for the same candidates. You look at countries like Canada, for example, the People's Party, overwhelmingly its base is young people. The Conservative Party, typically speak, right now it's mostly middle-aged people, but traditionally it's been older people. You look at the U.S. Republican Party base, old people, Democratic base, young people. Like it's a very normal divide in politics that young people and old people do not all vote for the same issues, and you only have so much political capital, so it's hard to rally old people and young people at the same time. Now, that said, if you do well in an election, you often have, like, if you did bad election A and then you do better election B, you likely do better across all demographics in election B. But there's a difference between doing better across all demographics and getting 30% plus of 65-year-olds and 30% plus of 25 to 34-year-olds. That's a very large combination and extremely unlikely. But we will see. Maybe we will get more polls before the end of the year. I'm expecting not. But until then, if you like the video, please like, share, and subscribe. Comment below if you think you I'm off base on any of my assumptions, or how you think it's going to play out, the selection going forward. Do you think Le Pen will be able to keep herself in first, second place, or do you think Pécresse is going to just eclipse her completely? Do you think Zemmour can come in? Do you think the left? Who do you think the French left would rally behind? Because if they don't rally behind anyone, they're going to be irrelevant this election. Let me know. All those things are very interesting. And until next time, hope you all have a great holiday. Merry Christmas, everybody.